Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today I wanted to make a response to a couple of questions that I received about how to start learning Spanish as a beginner without any prior knowledge about how to learn a language or anything like that. So I wrote a list of 5 tips, hopefully you can use, that will help you jumpstart your learning. These 5 tips were derived from my own experience learning Spanish. I'm not completely fluent yet, but I'm getting there. If you watch my first Spanish update video, I talk all about it. But that being said, I hope these 5 tips are useful to you. So let's just get right into it. Okay, so tip number 1, and I'd actually say step number 1 because this I think is a foundation of where you jumpstart from, is learn the 1,000 most common vocab words in Spanish. I say this because when I first started, I started off with an Anki deck that contained the 5,000 most common words in Spanish. Now, I didn't finish the Anki deck itself. I didn't do all 5,000. I got to around 1,700 before I kind of moved on to into native content and native sentences, reading and stuff like that. But it jump-started. By the time I hit 1,000, I was already into native content, understanding a lot. And I say that because I remember specifically thinking Anki has been a godsend. That was like 6 months in. I could understand around 50% with practicing only less than an hour a day. 50% of the media I watched on YouTube, on Netflix, and stuff like that. And so I did a little Google search and found that the first 1,000 most common words make up 88% of the spoken vernacular in Spanish. So learning that, it kind of clicked together. So I'd recommend you to learn the 1,000 most common words in Spanish because it's going to jumpstart your learning. Your comprehensible input's going to get easier and better. Every TV show, every movie that you watch, you're going to understand more and more. You're going to start learning from context faster. So I recommend that because it really pushes you into the language and entrenches you into native content, native media, and it's kind of like a godsend that people made a list, an Anki deck like that. So I'll share the Anki deck down below. It's completely free on Anki Web, shared. I think it's actually the top one under Spanish, so look out for that. A little addendum, when you first learn the 1,000 most common vocabulary words, you'll see that many of the words between English and Spanish are very similar, and that's because they derive from Latin, right? You'll see that words that end with tion are usually the same. Concentration, concentración. So they kind of change like that, right? And you'll see when you first start learning with a list like that, that it's going to help you eliminate the words that you already know. So when you see a word that looks exactly or very similar to where it is in English, make sure to suspend that card. Make sure to, make a mental note that, hey, this is the same word. You don't need to learn it. You already know it. So when you go through that deck, make sure to kind of suspend those cards and kind of get through words that you don't know. Get to 1,000 as soon as possible. You can even try learning 50 a day, which is possible because there's a lot of the words that are the same, like I told you. All right, so tip number 2, start immersing in native content. And what I mean by native content, I'm talking about YouTube videos that are made for natives, Netflix shows like Casa de Papel. I love that show. Gran Hotel is an awesome one. Just jump into stuff that you like. I remember watching Daredevil in Spanish around, I think it was a year in, and I remember thinking, wow, this is awesome. I'm actually watching a show that I want to watch in Spanish and understanding it. So get into it as soon as possible because your brain is going to start making those connections with the words that you learn in Anki or learn somewhere else. Whatever you read from context, your brain's going to start connecting it together. You're going to learn words through context. When you watch physical dramas or TV shows or anything, you'll see people's expressions. You'll see what they're doing, and then people describe what's going on, right? So you learn words through context like that. But make sure whatever you're watching is of interest to you. And you could also watch things that are made for Spanish learners. That's not a big deal. I know a lot of people are pretty hardcore on you should only watch native media or you should only watch things that are made for beginners. I think you can do both without any trouble. I remember watching, I will link two channels down below that are really useful. But I remember watching things for Spanish learners that actually helped me in the beginning. The two channels I just mentioned, or the two channels I was talking about, is one is called Español con Juan. He's a Spanish guy who actually teaches Spanish for a living, and he talks about Spanish in complete 100% Spanish, and he'll kind of use cues that make what he's talking about comprehensible. So you want to get things like that into your immersion time, because you'll enjoy it more if you understand it too. So I'll link him, Español con Juan, and the other one is Dreaming Spanish. And this guy is almost exactly the same as Español con Juan. They're both from Spain, and they both kind of help you understand what they're talking about with gestures. They'll do little drawings, but they'll speak at, you know, a speed that is reasonable, not like a baby, not like a kid. They'll speak at a reasonable speed, but they'll also repeat what they say, which kind of weirdly helps you understand it even more. So I'll link those in the description below, and we'll move on to tip number 3. All right, so tip number 3, start sentence mining. Start making sentence cards of the words that you see or that you want to learn out in the wild, out on a TV show. For me, I recommend mining from a text. So you can go check out a news article. Even if you don't understand a lot, try and see if you can find 5 I+1 phrases in one news article. I'm pretty sure when you're a beginner, you can. There's a lot of new words, new phrases that are I+1, meaning in the sentence, there's only one word or one phrase, one kind of grammatical structure that you don't understand. So when you get those, put them into Anki. Just make them into sentence cards. You can start off making 2 to 3 a day. The key is consistency. So when I first started, this is something I totally avoided. I was just like, oh, if I have to make 10 a day, this is gonna suck. You know, it's gonna be, it's just gonna be a hassle trying to find it. You can start with 1 a day. Just start making sure that you're doing it consistently. So learn 1 sentence card a day, and you'll get on track. And the other thing that majorly helped me was downloading a pre-made sentence deck. So on Anki Shared, you'll see that people have made sentence decks that contain 14,000, 10,000 sentences or whatever, and they'll order it from easiest to hardest. I'll put links to the ones I've used below, but these ones have been super useful, and especially if you combine it with Morphman. I will link a video to what it is from Matt vs. Japan's channel. He explains it way better than I ever could. Morphman helped me find I+1 cards in these pre-made decks. So, in summary, for the sentence mining aspect, the sentence card aspect of tip number 3 here, I would say use a pre-made deck and learn 10 to 15 new sentences a day from that. And with sentence mining, with native content, make 1 to 5 cards a day, but just make sure you do it every day. Okay, tip number 4, and I think this is one of the most rewarding aspects of language learning, is beginning to output, beginning to make friends in the language. I would say that when I first started, I started outputting immediately, which, you know, in hindsight, I don't think actually helps until you've reached a certain threshold of understanding. But I started outputting immediately. In some ways, it was good. In some ways, it was bad. The bad, I was wasting time because I wasn't improving. But I think the real important aspect here is that I made friends in the language, and it helped me get entrenched into the language easier, into the culture easier, and, you know, having someone there to kind of be like, hey, we haven't talked in a while, what's going on? You know, it gets you entrenched in the language, and it kind of keeps your motivation up, it keeps you just ready for more. So, I would recommend you download Hellotalk or Tandem or whatever, any other app, you know, italki, and just talk to people. You don't have to output. You don't have to specifically say, hey, I want to speak this language to you. You could use a method like crosstalk, where you ask them to type in Spanish and you type in English, so you guys both learn words, you know, like with each other. You'll learn how to read Spanish, and they'll learn how to read English. You know, you learn vocabulary words and all that. But being entrenched in the language is really one of the most motivated things. So take this tip with a grain of salt. I know a lot of people don't want to output as soon as possible, but it's helped me stay with it, stick with it, especially since I've had long pauses of 6 months plus not studying the language in the 2.5 years I've been studying Spanish. So, yeah, this is optional, but I'd highly recommend it. Right, and so tip number 5, this is something a lot of people are curious about, but it is grammar. Don't know if you guys can read this, it's flipped on my screen, but grammar, grammar study, when I first started, was like, oh, I have to learn grammar to start learning language. So I bought this book, Barron's Spanish Grammar Guide. I got to about page 50 out of, gosh, 200 pages here, and forgot everything I learned and didn't open this book for 2 years. I just found it in my drawer somewhere. So grammar study, completely optional, but I would highly recommend it if you love grammar. Don't do grammar just because someone else is telling you to do it. Do it if you really love learning about language grammar. If you're just a language nerd, language geek, please learn the grammar. If you do it. Don't let anyone else tell you not to do what you want to do in the language. The key is consistency. The key is having fun in the language. So if you love to learn grammar, learn grammar. So yeah, with all those 5 steps in summarized, I would say the most important parts are to be consistent in the language and to have fun in the language. I hope this video has been helpful to you guys. I hope I made sense. Sometimes I feel like I rambled on too much, but it's from my experience. There's a lot there. I'm still trying to gather my thoughts, and I'd appreciate you guys, commented and told me what you think. Tell me what your opinions are. I mean, I want this to be a discussion as well. I'm here to learn more about how to learn languages, and I'm hoping that I can share my experience with you, and you can help yourself grow and myself grow with your comments. So I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for everything.